Okay, good afternoon. This is a work session today. Would you take roll call, please, Rhonda?
Circus?
Here.
Shank?
Here.
Good?
Here. Mayor Butler will be here shortly. She was running late after a meeting. I know today we have primarily the continued discussion of the marijuana regulations. But before we get into that and to give Mayor Butler some time to get here, Clint, Markey asked you, I guess, for an update on some of the issues around the Labor Day concert on that infamous Friday night. So could you kind of get us kicked off?
Yep. The short version, I'll give you what I know and see if there's any outstanding questions that you want to touch on.
Sure.
Obviously, the concert went off like it has for 27 or 28 years that it's been going on. The permitting process is it's a 9-month-long process. They've been doing it for a long time. The promoters, like any promoter of any event, come in with an application. We accept the application and we work through a variety of different plans. When we go through this planning process, sometimes things stay the same. Sometimes we try and change. This year, over the last couple of years, we've talked back and forth with the JS, the promoters, about changing the entryway for a variety of reasons. They see it as an efficiency issue for their operations. And then when this last couple of years, we started talking about changing the entryway off of the main road. Everyone's missing.
Is he working?
Can
you start over?
Yes. Everything's fine. What else do you need to know? So anyhow, between their goal of having a single entrance, our goal of getting the entrance off of the main street and having the pedestrians separated from the vehicles, that's what we were aiming to do, and we went with this single entrance plan this year. When we were doing the evaluation for that, we recognized that no longer would there be the uphill stop, and we needed to figure out new transportations and how the transportation was going to work. In years past, when the town's done, I'm calling it the village transportation or the uphill transportation, last year when we did it, we had all our equipment, all our drivers on it, and it worked well with the distances we need to have to travel. Knowing the single entrance option would require us to use Owl Creek and around, we estimated to be about 40% more time to make the trips back and forth. And knowing that, we knew that we couldn't do it by ourselves. JAS understood it. If we threw everything at it like we did in the past, we still wouldn't have just the equipment to get it done. In conversations with JAS, they went out and talked to some other contractors. They talked to the school district, and with the school district, with the capacity of the buses, they ran some numbers. We evaluated the numbers they gave us, and they said, we think we can do it with the school buses, and we said, great. And so that's how we went forward. On Friday night, because of the event, the lightning event, the evacuation was immediate. Normally, when a concert ends, it's a trickle out, and so people start going earlier and whatnot. And so we were able to get a lot of people out early before the end of the concert. In this instance, because of the evacuation, we were not. And so everybody came out all at once, and that exasperated the issue. And that's how we got to where we were. On Friday night, getting just the snowmass line completely emptied took about 2.5 hours for lots of different reasons. Lots of different reasons. I'll leave it at that for a second. Saturday morning, we met, our staff, town staff, JS staff, lots of groups met, and we made a number of changes, and by Saturday night, it was emptied in about 45 minutes.
So amongst those changes, were more of those buses dedicated to the snowmass line?
Yes. Yep, there's a reallocation. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that happened, yes.
All right. Well, I have a comment that I'll make about a different part of that evening, and that is that the security people in I believe, or I'm led to believe that it was a new security company, and the security people were pretty poorly trained. I had 2 instances. Yeah, I really think so.
Exact opposite experience.
I really think so. I had 2 instances. One when the Two Creeks bus shuttle was coming into the Snowmass Club area. The security people initially thought and were telling the shuttle bus drivers that they had to go down and drive down to drop their people off at the rec center, at the main entrance, okay? That got straightened out via about a 5-minute series of radio calls back and forth. But then the next part was, and this is something that I was told, when the announcement came to leave the venue, people were going towards an emergency exit that was in the VIP area. And the security staff were telling people they couldn't go out that way. And eventually they sorted it out.
Took about 8 minutes to get that one. It took about 8 minutes to get that one sorted out.
Yeah. So you know about that one.
And those stories are relatively accurate, as I understand them as well. And those are things that we worked through and got them corrected on
Okay.
Saturday.
By the way, as far as where the buses went, that was fine the next day. But the big problem that I saw, at least from the end, from the Snowmass Club area where that pickup was that when the concert was called, all the people who were coming and going via some kind of private limousine or a small bus from one of the condo units and so forth, they all made their phone call, come and get me. And all these cars were lined up in the road. The people hadn't come out yet, so the cars stayed in the road,
Blocking everything.
and they blocked both entrance and exit to that circle. And literally, I mean, I must have sat, and I happened to be leaving at just before the announcement came. So I was well out of the venue when the announcement came, and I hopped on a bus, and the bus literally sat there for 15 plus minutes till all this confusion around that circle. So
Okay.
that's a problem
Yep.
with all these individual cars that are coming down there.
Yep.
So maybe that can be worked on.
And I hadn't heard that one. I mean, the staff, the guys, the folks that are doing the detail might have that one. I don't have that one,
Yeah.
but we can make sure it's addressed.
Yeah, but that was something to work on.
Can I ask a question about that, about the security? How come in the GA section, they're like checking bags and they're wanding people, and in the VIP section, they don't do that? I mean, someone going to VIP could just as well have a gun. I mean, it doesn't, I think it's very odd. I mean,
Well, you're
just
right.
because they're in VIP doesn't mean they're not gonna like start shooting. So I thought that was weird that they were so stiff on the other side, but on the VIP side, you could just walk in.
I don't know that answer.
Well, I mean, maybe they just.
Yeah.
And we can, I mean, again, these are things, I mean, I mean, I agree, this year's security was actually, more firm than it had been in years past with the wanding and whatnot. And so I'm a little surprised that, I mean, we did that purposely, it was a step up on security. I
Yeah.
don't know the answer on the VIP, we can find out.
I mean, I just.
And it could have been a miss, I don't know that answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think if
But
any
it-
person that's coming in.
There were a
should
number of
be-
changes, and like I said, we continue to work through them.
But as part of the community, and we are the community leaders,
Sure.
I think we should have, regardless, of what jazz is to us, we should have probably had better control of the lightning and the weather. That's my feeling. I think maybe we should, that's what I feel. I mean, I think because Travis knows when we referee football, we have ADs that have lightning on their app or whatever it is, the app they have, and they can get us off the field 10 minutes before, they can watch the cells and they get us off the field before lightning gets close.
When we do that, that's all technology that's available to us, and that's how the decision was made to stop the show.
Okay, I was at a game where we had a lightning delay, so I heard about
No,
it the next day. But
that's absolutely how the decision gets made. There's a group of people that have that and understand where it's at. We knew that the storm was 10 minutes out. The decision was made to end the show, and that's how we got where we
somebody
were.
told me that lightning just as they said you have to evacuate, lightning hit
I don't think that's
on the
accurate.
hillside.
Yeah,
So it almost seems like it was almost too late.
No, I mean, I don't want to speak to that, but
And I was not there, so I can't,
Absolutely.
I'm just going by what somebody told me.
yeah, we absolutely have a process for it. As far as the announcement goes, I think it's clear, at least to us, that that announcement needs to happen differently. Having the act make that announcement is probably not right. It's the first time in 27 years, to my understanding, that's happened. But, we've talked to other festivals and how they do it, Telluride being a good example. When they have to evacuate, which is more often than we do, the band kind of stops, somebody walks out and says, hey, folks, we've got the weather coming in, we're going to have to stop the show, whatever.
That was not what happened.
That's not what happened on
Cited like
Yep.
scariness.
Exactly. I mean, and so there are lessons to be learned, absolutely. But that's one of those, how does that information get conveyed? But I am confident in saying that, no, it was being tracked, and we did know.
Well,
it was
I think
coming.
there's just a great lesson to be learned here, obviously. I mean, whether it's a better lightning device, or besides, the apps aren't necessarily the best thing. There are some schools that have regular devices.
Yeah, and and I don't want to speak because I don't know this one for a fact, but yes, we have that capability. I know Skico does, and I know we've utilized it in the past. I don't know that we were utilizing it Friday. I assume we were, but I know that everybody was informed. I know everybody was watching it, and the decision was made.
Clint, is there a written evacuation plan for that festival?
A written evacuation.
Yeah, documented evac plan that gets scattered around to,
I don't know that. I mean, we probably have at least 13 different plans. I know we have transportation, we have wildlife, we have food. I can't tell you off the top of my head. I mean, the blowout gates are part of that, and we absolutely require that. So we do have procedures in place. Whether we have a specific evacuation plan, I can't answer that. And maybe Travis can, I don't know.
We do ask for an evacuation plan. I just can't tell you to what extent they provided one or how detailed
Okay.
it was. I'd look at it, but.
Your microphone.
But, I mean, but again, those are things that we continue to work through and on.
I
and-
understand,
yeah.
I understand. Okay, thank you. Well, I hope that the mayor is here any minute, and what perfect timing.
Hi.
Hi. So, we just finished the update.
Okay, well, good.
We just finished the update on the concert. So,
I have just one more quick thing to add, Clint. Maybe in special events, and when a special event permit is issued, do we require an evacuation
Yes.
plan from this?
Well, it depends. I mean, event by event, and I mean, something as small as, I don't have a good example. I'm going to imagine we don't have an evacuation
Well,
plan
I'm
for.
saying we're
balloons.
trying to create vibrancy at the base village,
Mm-hmm.
for next summer and any kind of summer event. Obviously, I don't think we're gonna have lightning in the winter, it's not a big issue. But springtime, summertime, any type of concerts we do over there, that, whether it is, I think we should require some kind of plan to get people out of there if need be. I know Base Village, they could probably run into the limelight, I'm sorry, excuse me. They could probably go somewhere and get out of whatever, and it's not like being out in the open field down at the rec center, but I still think we should have something like that in place.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of different examples, and I mean, a good example would be like 4th of July event, if you remember. The fire was going, the Lake Christine fire was going, and we chose to go ahead with our 4th of July event anyhow. And if the power would have gone out there, we had some plans in place, but it would have been a little hectic getting folks dispersed. But we made the decision to say it's better to not cause a lot of concern, and it worked out fine. And I would knock on wood if there was some near me. But then when the Spin Doctors concert, during the Def Camp concert, if you were at that concert, you know, the band didn't come on for, what it was, an hour or whatever it was because of there's some stage issues. And so we try to address those on a case by case, and we've got ideas in place, we've got procedures in place, but a formal evacuation plan is difficult, but then it's noted.
I just think in the future, you know, like I said, there's a lesson to be learned here, and the lesson is for the future. So when a special event happens, we need to be, I think, not like it was the town's fault, but we need to add to whatever plan they have.
And we do, and we approve, they submit, we approve, and, you know, we modify throughout. So, I mean, that is exactly the process that it goes through. And, like I said, it was lots of stuff going on that night, for sure.
So, just a comment, all communities do have an emergency plan, and you can't always plan for the one-offs that occur. It'd be lovely that we could predict lightning and stuff like that happening, but it's very, very difficult having to write a huge emergency plan for an organization. Government requires them, the fire department, we had the presentation just recently, and I thought it was well done. The point is, with any plan, you can always make improvement, but to always plan to have everything in place for what occurred that night, it's very, very hard. We got a hurricane moving into North and South Carolina, but it was predictable. And people are busy, busy, busy with emergency plans right now. So I appreciate, Tom, I think it's really, really good, but I don't know how we could have planned that one.
No, I don't think, I
mean,
I'm just trying to figure out what the lesson is to be learned here, that's all. And maybe
Just
we
to have a
can do
good
that.
quality emergency plan.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, the benefits are, we do have high-quality coordination and communication between all the departments, and it was new that night, and so I think the silver lining, of which there's plenty of them, but one of them is, you know, the fact that, you know, Friday night was a 2.5 hour, you know, departure or evacuation, whatever you want to call it, and Saturday night was 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and so I think, if anything, that shows that, yep, we understood it, we got on it, we made a bunch of changes, and it got a lot of improvement, and we'll continue to improve and tweak going forward.
A question on another subject, event subject, but I had some people kind of complain to me that they were disappointed Saturday night when they came up for the light up and expected to see a balloon with, you know, lit up, and basically all they got was
Flame.
was the burner.
No, they had 2 balloons up
There
Saturday.
was one up by the stage,
Yeah.
and there was one down by.
No, but the 2 tried to go up, but the winds were too strong, and so they had to bring them back
West
down.
winds, huh?
Oh, it was,
Okay.
yeah, the reason why you pull down is the winds, and the winds got very squirrely.
And that's a safety issue that the
Yes.
pilots make.
Well,
but
that's what I suggested that was the problem,
Yeah.
but
That's right.
you just confirmed it, thank you.
I'm a balloonist, I know. It's bad.
Go up in the air, the captain's in charge.
That's right.
That's exactly right, the pilot's in charge.
That's right.
But yeah, and those are things that, I mean, that's just another good example that, you know, we try and make plans in place, we do our best, and then weather happens.
Yeah,
It works
got
out.
it. Okay, it's all yours.
No, it's not all mine, it's all ours.
That's all yours.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. I'm sorry I was a little late. Dealing with Medicare today is, well, anyway, let's not talk about Medicare. Let's move on to talking about this being a work session, and what our goal today is. We probably won't get it all done. We're working on regulations, and I don't know who was behind putting all the maps together. Probably you, Travis. You know what? One of the things that I would be helped in our listening public and those in the audience, if we could just really go through some of the thoughts on the maps. I don't know about you, but I had some problems reading all the
I
maps.
can't read them.
They're very hard.
Well,
I blew them up.
okay, what happened to me was when I first saw them, I didn't understand what the dots meant.
I don't know.
So I got clarification, so, that is, I mean, just a suggestion on each of the maps to title, you know, what the dots represent. But in any case,
Okay. So,
Okay,
Dots, there's a legend on the map,
Yeah.
the dots are,
yeah, okay.
I just think it's really hard to understand. Like, I rather have it written out in words, because I can't look at that map and really understand it. I'm sorry.
let's just
not a
move
map reader.
on to look at the maps. Okay, guys, let's,
yeah, let's look at the maps.
I really appreciate all the work that's been done
There were
on
a
this.
few other changes we made to the framework that we
Yes,
discussed last month.
yes.
One of which was we added language to prohibit retail marijuana stores from locating on the pedestrian level of the Snowmass Mall. We added additional sign restrictions. One was to prohibit the use or display of marijuana symbols. And we also reduced the total square footage of the primary sign of each store
Yeah.
from 10 square feet to 4.5 square feet. Reason being is one of our planning staff pointed out that that was the maximum allowed on the gateway building of the mall, so we wanted to be consistent with that. And since it's more restrictive, we didn't think it'd be fair to allow.
Gateway
Larger
building on the mall.
Apparently that's where incline sports is, fuel.
There's different
Oh.
sign code, different sign requirements, so we went with the most restrictive sign requirement of them all.
Yeah.
Okay,
Makes sense.
okay.
And other than that, we spent most of our time with maps. So, as you will recall, this is where we left off last time. This is the marijuana district overlay that we drafted up for your consideration. This is the only place in town that retail marijuana stores would be allowed to locate. But,
Can you
as-
walk through all of this? I mean, you're moving through really fast.
Absolutely. So, this would just be an overlay on top of our existing land use code and zoning districts.
Okay, let's take a look at this, okay? Get us oriented.
This is attachment A.
This is
Correct.
attachment A, correct.
Get us all oriented.
So
What
we
we're
are
looking-
here right now. This is Town Hall.
Okay,
This is the Snowmass Center. This is Brush Creek Road. And the map is oriented north. So right here we have Base Village going up towards the mall. Up to Timberline?
Yes.
Timberline. So again, this is the only place in town that retail stores would be allowed. But where our conversation went last time was about adding buffers in this zone to sensitive areas with high densities of children, youth. So we drew up a couple of different scenarios for your consideration.
Travis, point out the mall on that, please.
Right here. So we have the Skittles lift here. This is actually the summer free concert stage shown on the satellite imagery. I can zoom in a little bit. Just bear with me. So there's the free concert stage. There's the Skittles gondola, Venga
I
Venga
can't see your cursor.
pointer.
Pointer,
Yeah, pointer might be better.
Can you see my hand now?
Yeah, I can see your hand.
So this is the patio of Venga Venga, going down the mall, Gene Taylor's, Gateway building that we discussed, fuel. Thanks, John. Does that help?
you probably need to point on that one, cause the counselors can't see.
Is this a joke?
I don't, I just handed it off. There you go.
So, free concert stage, Venga Venga. Trying to think of some more landmarks. Gene Taylor's, fuel. You can tell where I go on the mall.
free advertising.
Those are the places I know. So from there, within this district overlay, the town council wanted to see what buffers would look like from, we'll say, sensitive areas with high densities of youth,
Let's go to number 3, Travis.
with just the childcare facilities,
That's, so we
or all of them.
go to the, just childcare, because it's easier to see how it grows.
So these two blue dots are the only licensed childcare facilities within this zoning district overlay. One, of course, is the Treehouse. The other one we actually didn't know about, but it's the Weston Kids Club. Apparently, they offer daycare services for their guests, but they are a licensed childcare facility.
That's at the Weston, right?
Correct.
Would you expand that on a little bit, please?
Absolutely. So, I realize this was confusing, and I apologize. But the blue dots are we'll call it the center of those locations. The darker circle would be a 300-foot buffer. So that's 300 foot in a straight line, 300 feet in a straight line. And the yellow circle would be 500 feet in a straight line.
So the reason why the Little Red Schoolhouse was left out because it's not in the district?
Yeah,
The
it's
suggested,
off the map. It is another licensed childcare facility, you're absolutely right, but it just doesn't have any impact on this conversation.
Well, that is if this map doesn't change.
True.
So when we're writing regulations, I would encourage any,
Okay.
okay, but let's go on. So
I think
this
that is how we would word it, is any
And
licensed
these are just the
childcare
two that are
facility.
impacted by the district.
No, the district could change over time with different councils.
Yeah, I think you're,
But the standards you put in for this district, if you change it, you could incorporate the same standards or different standards.
but we're not gonna say 300 feet from the treehouse, we're gonna say 300 feet from any childcare facility,
Why
which
300?
would include
Well,
licensed.
300 feet is what's here, but we'll get into that
Right,
conversation.
just as an
You
example.
could have chosen 500.
Yeah.
He's showing both there.
Yeah.
300 and 500.
But on the lower, that's the lower one. So on that lower one,
This is the treehouse, yes.
right, but how, on the upper end of it, like where it says like near, past Burlingame or past Anderson Lane, where does that cover? Like what physical places? Like that deck below Vanga Vanga, because that really bothered me. That area, that retail space, it's like right under the Skittles. So, I mean, I want to know how far that extends up.
So, if I think I know what you're talking about, the place you're talking about, I think under this scenario, even under a 500-foot buffer, that would be a permissible location.
Okay, well, that's crazy to me because it's right under the Skittles, which is like little kids all day long.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, I think, it's nice because it's tucked under there, but it's next to the current clinic and it's right where there's kids every single day.
Agree.
Actually, as you look at this, I think that area is in the 500-foot buffer.
It just was really hard to tell on those maps.
It is, but, I mean,
If it was a circle, it would be excluded. Is it a circle that we're talking
Doing a
300?
laser pointer, right?
So the dark circle is 300 feet, the light one is 500 feet. And one thing to keep in mind is that these are straight lines. And so what's in the regulations is proposed is walking paths. So, no one can walk straight from that blue dot at the Weston to the Skittles. It's just impossible. So those circles would actually be shrunk a little bit in reality, the way we'd measure it as proposed.
So I'm a little confused. Are we talking circles or part of circles? Because I see the yellow and the orange doesn't come out on the drawing.
that's because the edges, these are the edges of the overlay. So
Oh, I
there's
see.
no way marijuana could be sold over here, because this is the edge of the overlay. This is the center of the licensed childcare. This is 300 feet within the marijuana overlay. This is 500 feet within the marijuana overlay. And Melissa, this is the mall going through right here. See, that's the edge
Yeah.
that's the pavilion right there.
Right.
And this would be underneath.
So it does cover it then, if you go 500.
It's
Very close.
very close, but this is this is the far edge of the deck. And out here
Would it cover the clinic? Because when the clinic leaves, that space is gonna be available.
Right.
well, the clinic is down here,
Right.
because it's right here at the end of Daly Lane, so it's right in that area. It would be outside the 500-foot.
And that's still like under where the Skittles is.
Well, I would urge you to not create this zone based on existing uses. Because if there's anything that history teaches us, is that they change. And I would expect a certificate of occupancy to be issued for the new clinic, which would be, Travis, if you could scroll, get Base Village back in. That is going to be
Over here.
right there. That's where the clinic will be.
And I mean, I'm not so concerned about I mean, I'm just more concerned about that part of Fanny Hill, because regardless if there's a Skittles or not a Skittles, it's still where like all the little kids race when they do their racing days, and
But this
I
is the
just-
discussion that I would encourage you to have at the 5. What we're trying to do
No,
is
I
do
get
that.
it.
And
That's my concern. When I was looking at this, that was like a very big concern of mine, because I didn't
Travis.
think that it covered that.
Sorry, where is the Skittles on this?
So the base would be
Might be, if you,
about here?
Yeah, and then does it travel outside the district?
Yes,
Yeah,
if you,
partially. Oh, look, you can see the actual gondolas right there.
So
That's-
in the
those are the 6 cars, 3 going up and 3 going down.
so,
Then
That's-
the terminus would be,
Yeah.
Here.
It's
oh,
always there.
sorry, right there.
terminus is there?
Or I guess like,
And that's in the district.
It's in the district, yes.
That's in the buffer in the
That's
district.
in the 500-foot range.
Right, but that space below it, which is what connects
Right.
that to the treehouse, is where all the kids are. I mean, I realize there's residential there, so it's not retail anyways, but you still have that whole space in that, what's that building called, the old mill building?
Oh,
or whatever.
mill building.
Yeah. That concerns me a little bit.
Okay, I think that we need to put that down as an issue.
An issue perhaps, but we'll continue to discuss.
Maybe,
What-
please.
When you said that as an issue, what did
Well,
you mean by
the
that?
whole issue of Skittles at the terminus,
Okay.
either up or down in terms of many, many children. And they get off the Skittles, and they stand there, they're out on the trails, and the same at the terminus. So I think that, I personally believe, that whole area, it's a kid ski area.
Well, it is a kid ski area, as there are kid ski areas on all of the mountains, of these 4 ski mountains, and including Aspen, where Aspen has exempted any of the ski cope areas from their whatever regulation they've created. So essentially what Aspen has done is say, the fact that there are kids on our ski runs is not gonna impact where a marijuana facility dispensary would be.
Yeah, but I feel like this is such a different situation, Bob, because if anyone has spent any time on Fanny Hill, and you see, they set up the little kid races right there. I mean, I don't have any pictures, but I'm telling you.
Well, they set up, I mean, if I'm thinking about the same area,
Yes.
okay, I'm thinking much further down towards the treehouse.
No,
Where-
it's like right where the
No.
clinic is.
Right where the clinic is, right
And
outside.
I know because that's where my locker is and that's where I come
Okay,
out.
okay.
And that's
Okay.
my concern. I mean, you have kids that are just stopped right there. I mean, I realize you can't, there's kids in lots of places, but I'm talking about that is a high concentration of kids right there, stopped for periods of time, and I just don't feel like it's an appropriate place to have that. I mean, it's like right there on the side of the mountain. I realize further down you can't have it because it's residential, but right there in the retail area, that is a place, I mean, Renee put it in her email, and I was like, no. Like, that is a big red flag
Well,
to me.
okay, so let's come back to, let's not think, let's not create these things based on what we know today. So what would happen, this is hypothetical, right? What would happen if we allowed a dispensary in that space, okay? Then SkiCo has to make a decision whether in their mind, they don't want these kids by there, in which case they would move this little racing area.
Are you kidding?
They got a whole Fanny Hill to do this.
No.
Oh, no.
Well,
Well, Bob, one reason they do it is because the big burnt bears and the pandas, they're all right there. They can't take, I'm I'm not even devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
The idea is, these kids can't travel that far. Some of them are only 3 years old. They got the little half hula hoop
But-
up and they go under it and,
But those are the kids who were down by the treehouse.
They also take the
no,
older kids.
no, they'll go up Skittles and they'll start there and then they
Yes.
ski down to the.
Yes.
Well, yes, they do,
Right, right.
but they're not, okay.
Yeah.
I've never seen.
Yeah, remember, I'm a proponent of trying to figure
I
out where we're
know.
gonna do this,
I
so,
know that.
but I understand the Melissa's point.
Oh.
And
I mean, that's where the Big Burn Bears used to be under
it used to
Manga
be,
Bay.
they're not there anymore,
Used to
and
be,
I know.
but that's the whole point.
No, but I'm
No.
saying there's
But-
still kids.
There's still kids right there.
They'll still be there, because that's the easiest way for them to transport them up. You know, like the kids, that's the reason it's called the Skittles in the first place, because the kids named it.
Yes.
It wasn't named by the ski company as the Skittles, okay? The kids thought they looked like M&Ms to them, and anyways, candy. So
Look like Skittles.
I understand Alyssa's point, and we gotta find a better spot, and I don't think we need to beat this
I
bush
don't
that
think-
long.
And we should not be focusing on the location per se, but the regs of who owns what building and what might be the potential locations.
Right.
At this point.
So I think we
we're all
can move
about-
on, instead of focusing on this point, let's just see what else is available.
Okay, let's go on. Okay, let's put that one then, right there. And I hear exactly what Alyssa's saying. Okay, go on.
I would make a suggestion that we could cut out, the ski hill side of this district.
I agree.
Does that make sense? Clint?
Well, I've seen some people out in the
I don't know
audience
what that
agree.
means. What does that mean?
They agree out there.
Move this line over so that,
Where?
basically the real estate that borders the Fanny Hill wouldn't be available.
To where would you
The
move
way-
it over to?
The way to understand that is you would add another buffer, and it would be based in proximity to the ski hill.
Mm-hmm.
And just think of it as, I don't know, whatever different color you wanna use up
Yeah.
there, but that would be
And-
applicable.
I agree. I mean,
Nothing
because
slopes
otherwise,
out.
honestly, what you're creating is a ski in, ski out marijuana shop, which I think, I mean,
Hey,
They got one in
drive-through.
drive-through in Paris.
I just don't think that's a good idea for snow house.
Okay, there's some consensus up here on moving that line over. I see people
Well, it's-
nodding their heads out.
It'd be leaving the line, but adding an additional buffer.
Yes, yeah.
And so, should we do a 3 and 500, or a 300-foot buffer?
What,
or-
From the top of the Skittles?
500.
From that line, from that line right there,
Yeah,
is there a consensus to add a buffer along that line to the west, essentially? So that there's not ski in, ski out?
It would be like this.
Yeah, it'd be like a little tunnel from the bottom of the Skittles to the top of the Skittles. You're saying.
It almost follows
I
the
would
end of it.
say,
Yes.
I would think about it as as a buffer on either side of the Skittles. If that, because that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Right. I think that's Alyssa's main concern, because the Skittles is right above the little kids' race, and he wants to see the dispensary coming up the Skittles.
I'm just trying to figure out what the consensus is. I'm not arguing one way or the
I
other.
Yeah,
think
I
they're-
mean, I think that's
I think
consensus.
Tom's there, I'm
Some
there.
people.
You're there where, on what?
Was moving the line over. I almost think it follows the Benedict Trail.
I was just gonna say the Benedict.
The trail.
Which, help me out, is
Right there.
Right in through here.
I mean, that's all residential anyway. So going from the bottom of Skittles up to where the clinic is at the moment would cover what you're concerned
Yeah,
about.
we could do, well, you could
Right,
just
but,
follow the
I mean,
Benedict
the-
Trail.
Well,
I mean, my main concern is to make sure we leave room for it. We've already talked about this. I mean, if you block out everything, there's no room for anything.
No, I mean, if that area was not next to Skittles and right on the ski trail, then I'd be like, it's great because it's down low, it's not in sight, but it happens to be right next to the kids area.
all right, so I'm gonna suggest then, if there is this desire to move that, that border over to the Benedict Trail area, then I would suggest that the childcare, registered childcare diameter, circle, whatever you want to call it, would be 300 feet, not 500 feet. Because you don't need to go out 500 feet in order to get that area that you're talking about.
Well, this is just childcare centers. We haven't done bus stops.
Let's do one at a time. Let's try to
Who's
get 'em-
running this meeting?
Let's try to get them one at a, I mean, we're looking at childcare, we're not looking at bus stops at the moment.
No, but we'll do that overlay soon.
I thought Bob was
So-
running.
Can I ask a question? If you leave, if it's at the 500, does it exclude, it's because it's really hard for me to like understand my bearings. Does it exclude the top level of the mall that like you'd go down if you're going to the Westin? Because
Albert Lane?
yeah, because to me, that's an area we've talked about that might be, you know, plausible. And so in trying to make room for areas, I feel like that is an important consideration in the 300 versus the 500.
Let's just track that. Where the Westin?
It's really hard to tell.
Let me zoom in a little bit. But to answer your question, Alyssa, I think this would allow a section of Albert Lane
Yes.
to have retail marijuana stores and not the half that's closest to the Westin. If that's
Go ahead.
500 feet.
But what does the 300 really do? Let you put it by the Westin? I mean, I'm just confused at
it
the
would-
300 versus 500 in this scenario.
On this, one thing, just because this is an initial analysis, again, these are straight lines, not walking distances, so the circles will be smaller, you should know. And this is at the best guess of where the child care facility is inside the facility, inside the Westin. And so we would, I mean, some of this detail that's gonna have to work through is, do you measure from the front door of the child care facility, or do we measure from the front door of the Westin? And those are some of that stuff that we'd have to talk through, so, and I bring that detail up only to say, if we're trying to get absolutely what's in and what's out, it's gonna be pretty difficult. If the goal is, hey, every other community's got a 500 foot, we should be 500, or because we're so constrained in where we're allowing at 300 feet, I think that might be a little more effective discussion, because where we measure from, this is not exact. This is best guess. It's good technology. It's pretty damn close.
No, and I
confident
get
telling
that.
you.
I'm just trying to understand, like, I mean, if you're at the 300 versus the 500, does that, like, you know, is that the building where the flower shop and the nail salon, is it included or not included? It's really hard for me to get a grasp.
You can't really visualize what's where in this.
Right there's the flower shop.
Okay.
So if you do the 500, then the flower shop
area.
is a no-no. And if you do the 300, then the flower shop is an okay.
And really, if you wanna look at it on a broader level, there's more hotel beyond this, but the shops are all they're
Right.
beyond the 300, assuming that this is the location within. But what Clint was saying, and because Snowmass is on the side of a hill, the 300 is calculated as threshold to threshold as a pedestrian would do it.
Right.
So to really go up there, and I don't know what floor this is on. I know that the top floor in this part of the building is 8. And then I think the mall level is LL.
That's right.
So, I mean, you're talking 10 stories difference.
Right.
So this 300-foot circle is based on a linear, it doesn't include the horizontal measurement. Okay, not a vertical. But if you measure it by pedestrian, you know, threshold to threshold as a pedestrian would go, it could be very, I mean, this 300 circle could come to this if it was down here like where the cabaret room used to be.
Right.
Because that was
Right. That was
sub Albert Lane
Yes.
space, whereas this is really almost Gallon Lane level.
Could we find out where that child care facility is located within the Westin?
Yeah.
We think it's pretty close. We think, I mean,
We were just trying to illustrate how large of a buffer we
Well,
would be talking with the 300
It's what I
foot
call
and
the
500.
parking lot. We gotta do some more homework where things are located within the Westin, because we're not gonna solve that problem tonight. But so looking at Albert Lane, over in the green area, can you kind of point out some of the
Like
the
El
buildings?
Poggio.
Yeah,
Little Pojo's right, well, Travis is moving, it's right
Parking.
there.
How good you are.
Here's our transportation office on the corner.
yeah, okay.
This would be on the ground level. Gene Taylor, well, actually, that's the Discovery. Gene Taylor's back here a little bit.
Yep. Okay. So there's space on Albert. So what you're demonstrating, there's opportunity up on Albert Lane.
Yes.
Okay.
But, just as an example, if you're talking Albert Lane here, assuming this is somewhat to scale, if you had a 300-foot buffer between establishments,
You could have one.
You could have,
Down one.
Perfect.
right, now, I don't begin to know the vertical down to the mall from here, but is it, let's say from, this would probably be stew pot in here on the mall level?
mm-hmm,
Is that 300 feet when you include the vertical? I can't tell you. But we can measure it. We can go out there with a wheel and figure it out.
kind of some of the next steps, go ahead.
That's all I really had to say. You're asking
So
about
wait a
Albert
minute,
Lane.
so where do we end up with?
The
mo-
potential
wi-
shop.
With moving this, this border?
We don't know exactly where the childcare facility is within the Weston.
No, not that, the district border.
Right. This is basically the
Skittle.
Benedict Trail, this line right through here. Here's Skittles, you see the cars. Here's the landing area.
I mean, by moving the line over, the only thing we're really eliminating is the downstairs of the timber mill building. Everything else to the east of the Benedict Trail is residential, correct?
I think there's some commercial in the Mountain Chalet.
There is?
I think there's an office space, and I think there might be a restaurant space where they do their breakfast. I'm not positive.
That's just right inside the lounge.
What?
What were the, yeah,
I can't tell you the zoning. You know, it could still be the original CPA, because they haven't really done any changes to that. That could be from the sixties. But we can look it up.
okay.
But yes, build generally, but generally everything in there would, from here to the east, other than this area right here, underneath the Hive building, Daly Lane area, here's where the slope side lanes would be, and then the clinic. Those are definitely commercial. But below Daly Lane, down all the way to Base Village would be
Residential.
generally residential.
All right,
We almost need to look
Melissa.
at the bus.
What?
what's the, where's the limit? Would you be satisfied with the limit being Daly Lane, the end of Daly Lane?
What do you mean the limit?
In other words, anything past the end of Daly Lane down there would be outside of the district.
Down where?
From Travis's
From
hand
Travis's hand out to the
skid. in-
border on the right, just where Travis is moving.
Yeah, so basically the bowling alley.
The bowling alley wouldn't be
No, the
included.
bowling alley would be west of the original
No, the
hand.
bowling alley's is a permissible location.
Yes, so we're talking about the same thing. So do you think that that looks reasonable, given your concern about the skiing, you know, by the,
Ski school.
well, you know, by the now clinic?
Yes, I think it's better. I mean, you know, I still feel like that bowling alley area is this like sort of weird like ski in, ski out thing, but it's much better to me than underneath where Vanga is. in the bottom of the timber mill
here.
building. I mean, that to me is just like so slope side that at least you have a little bit of buffer. But I feel like the clinic in that underneath of Venga is way too slope side. At least where the slope side lanes are, you gotta kind of walk into that little corridor.
Right, and there's a little parking.
And that is better
area.
to me,
And there's a parking area there.
yes.
So it might be easier just to add a 300-foot buffer from the Skittles line up and down.
And I would just add it, I mean, if you kept existing district and added 300 feet from the existing district,
300 foot what, to the west,
Where
or are you
John's
gonna
pointing.
go 150 each way?
where John's pointing, 350 to the west, 300 to the west, and we can do some numbers and
I
see.
think we're just
gonna
taking
be-
everything out.
It's gonna be
And then,
roughly,
we haven't even looked at the bus stops yet. Then we're gonna start talking about the shuttles. And then the shuttle's gonna push it back in.
Well,
Let's take them
let's-
a
But,
minute.
one
and
thing at a
so,
time.
but I guess if the district stays the same,
Right.
if this argument gets any, like, don't switch on me, Travis.
sorry.
Um, But if the district stays the same, then we're just basically adding more buffers, and and we're saying 300 or 500 feet from a licensed childcare, 300 feet from the eastern side of the district, and then we can show you what that looks like. If that's, I mean, if the council, if there's consensus from the council that there ought not be ski in, ski out sales, then we can, put some kind of
Clint,
scale.
I don't think it's 300 feet from the end of Daly Lane to the district line.
Right.
That's
Clint's-
not 300 feet.
It's more like about right here,
It's
Bob.
not even
It's right off
150
that
feet.
corner, just
Yeah.
about.
Yeah,
And that's, for me, that's too much.
Okay, and that's the number and I guess what I'm advocating is keep the district and let's add the buffer off the district, because the Skittles veers to the east, it
right.
veers away, and so if you do it off the Skittles, it doesn't line up exactly with that commercial, and if we
No,
do
but
it off
if
the,
you took, I don't have a pointer, but if you took where that little elbow is, down towards the base village,
Mhm,
in the district line,
mhm.
Where?
no, next one, go up that line. Go up towards the mall. Now, slow down, go back to that little elbow.
We're looking at John's or Travis's?
Oh, I don't know who's got that.
Here's the red one. You talking about this elbow or this
No,
elbow?
no, on the district line.
Right here?
Yes, that elbow.
Uh-huh.
And then just straighten that out so that it
Comes up to
comes
the,
up to
to the
Daly
end,
Lane,
right.
and then cut it back.
So put a triangle in right here.
Yes. So basically you're taking out Fanny Hill.
Follow the edge of Fanny Hill from this corner, right up to
Yeah,
Daly
right-
Lane.
Right to there, and then you can cut back.
Yeah, and this is based on property lines, and so, I mean, neither here nor there, but just so you know, this is property lines, and so we'd be splitting properties, just to be aware.
could we see both options, following Benedict and one with a triangle?
Well, it sounds like the real key here is that it's the extent of this area that you need to define, right?
Yeah, because what you're,
Here's slope side, here's the clinic, and here's the under belly of Venga. So just this area right here is what you're very concerned about, exposure to youth.
Yes.
And you want two options, one that would be less restrictive and one that would be more restrictive, which
Right.
would be to extend that.
Yes.
We can give you both of those pretty easy, can't we, Travis?
Yes.
I defer to the technical genius.
Your IT guy?
No, he's still lost at Bernie, man.
I was saying, let's just get the other overlays before we.
Thought I could do it right now, but I can't.
Let's go on to another topic.
Yeah.
Let's go on. Can we put this kind of over there on that parking lot, follow-up issues versus trying to fix it right now? Okay, moving on.
What else? It's up to you, I mean, what else do you guys need to,
What was the next option you wanted to show us?
We added other locations such as Aspen School District bus stops and Challenge Aspen, which is this map. So the red dots are those actual locations, including the Weston Kids Club, the Treehouse, and then those additional locations with the bus stops, which are here, 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 and here, and then Challenge Aspen, which is located here.
Can you pull that up a little bit? It's okay. So,
So does that mean it leaves no space for them?
Pretty
Is
much.
that what I'm looking at?
Go up to the mall, Trav.
Okay.
Yes, not much.
Looks good to me. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Everything that's green is ski and ski out, so.
And really, what's funny is this
Yeah, we
takes
just-
out the whole mall, and your
We just
draft
cut
just
that
cut
out.
out this corner as well, so. You could probably eliminate if you went with these, you could eliminate the prohibition on main mall level, because they'd be out by the buffers.
so looking at the mall area and looking at Albert Lane, Challenge Aspen. It's a school bus. Okay, that's a school,
No, that's Challenge Aspen,
okay?
that's school. And I'm assuming, Travis, that this 500, this 300 is from Challenge Aspen?
Yes. Challenge that basically makes this one
That one's out of the,
redundant.
out of the overlay.
Right.
What would happen if we came in maybe not 300 from a school which is Challenge Aspen, but maybe,
I'm still confused why Challenge Aspen should be labeled as an educational facility.
I think they defined whether it's a school or not.
Yeah, but it's not,
I think an entity they should have some type of a license or some type of a credential as a school.
well, you know,
I don't know that much about all their various operations.
I'm just thinking, we're eliminating so many spots with the school buses and the boundaries. There's nothing available.
Well, maybe there will be. Can we,
Where? Yeah, where?
I was gonna,
Yeah.
No mass center?
the thought was perhaps you change the diameter of that circle from 300 to less,
So right now, Travis, that circle by Challenge Aspen is 500 feet or 300?
300.
It's 300.
Is it,
Well,
then the question is,
That one is, and then out here is 300, 500.
That kind of limey green, that green that Travis's hand on,
Right.
anything that's there is within 500 feet
500
of all
feet.
those dots.
And
It's
little,
that-
the more orangey one is 300 feet.
So the way it's designed right now, with the dots and everything, there's no room for a dispensary in West Village.
If you include all those.
Right.
well, I was gonna change the size of the circle, but,
Even
How
if we
did you-
change the size of the circles, the places that are currently under consideration are all within, 50 feet of Challenge Aspen. So we would basically hamstring the new owners of the mall.
I don't know where all the locations are. I haven't been informed, other than through an email.
Well, there's one that used to be the Hideaway.
I-
There's one.
I
which
haven't
used to
heard
be
that
the
from-
Yogas-
Have we heard that from Ramiro and Company?
Yes.
You really shouldn't be talking about
Yes.
the locations. You're talking about districts, and what the current owners say they will rent could very well change depending on how the districts are drawn. So saying, now I agree that the Hideaway is right here, and you could shorten your buffer to Challenge Aspen to probably 25 to 30 feet, and you're gonna be at the front door of the Hideaway. Now, that's not how you decide, because that's a vacant space, and the landlord wants to rent it. That's not how you decide the zoning, okay? You come up with a broader picture and then let the market figure that out.
Yeah. I'm of the mind that this slide should not be included, these zone districts.
Well, I disagree with that.
Well, maybe you should possibly break it down into the three things that this one shows. Childcare, bus stops, and Challenge Aspen, and maybe look at it from that point of view.
So can we look at that bus stop? It's outside, I think it's in the district, over where the RAFTA,
This one right here,
yep. How far,
That circle is based off of Challenge Aspen because that's the more restrictive circle.
right, because
Everything
these,
within that bus stop would be within the Challenge Aspen circle.
Yes.
so if it were,
99% for this discussion.
If you were to take the bus stop and did 300 feet around the bus stop and eliminate the Challenge Aspen, that would give more opportunity.
It would be almost identical.
It would be identical?
here, go like this, Tom.
Okay, all right.
so then if that were to happen, what space would be available in the mall on Albert?
I'm sorry, if what were to happen?
So if you were to move this, if you eliminated Challenge Aspen just for one, right now, and go to the bus stop, how far is it from the bus stop over to the 300-foot circle? And if that were the case, that's probably what, 50
About
feet?
right here.
What spaces up on Albert Lane would be available? Kind of identify. It wouldn't be
Sunset Ski Repair House.
If you keep the bus stop in, and if you eliminate Challenge Aspen, but you keep the bus stop in, then none of that was everything in that dark yellow, or I'm terrible at colors, whatever that darker color is, it would still be prohibited at 300 feet. I mean, if you go, can you throw the childcare? I mean,
But it could leave that whole building like where the flower shop is.
well, no, but, I mean, again, if there's some consensus, there's going to be a restriction from a licensed childcare facility.
Right.
If there's a consensus of that, here's the two colors that are generated from that circle.
Right, but you still, if you go with the 300, then it still leaves you, I don't know what that building is called where the flower shop is. And
If you go with 300 from that.
Right, so even if you had it from the bus stop and you had it from there and you put it at 300 instead of 500, then you have that whole building and a little space on Albert Lane.
So if you go back to the other photo or the other shot, then because it's that light green, you're right. Those are the
Yes.
those are the 500-foot restrictions.
Right.
So if you go with 300s, you're accurate. If you go with 500s, then then it's not.
Right.
well, the other question still is, where within the Weston is the child care center? I don't really know.
It's within 30 feet of this.
Oh, okay.
80 feet. Give me 80
So you
feet.
still have at least one area where you could have a shop?
Well, if you go with the 300-foot restrictions,
Yes.
everything in that light, in that color green on
Yes.
Travis's
Which
hand
means
is,
there's a little space
all
on
allowed.
Albert Lane and there's that building where the flower shop is. Somebody needs to tell me the name of that building. So I can stop calling it the flower shop building.
Well, I think it should
Below
be
the
the
dragon.
flower shop, because it's been there forever,
Right.
or Susie's. Okay,
I was gonna say
can we,
the refectory.
what's the other one that you were gonna show us?
Closure was too close to the bus stop.
I don't have any other
Where's the
maps or
center? Can
examples.
you go
I
over
have
to the center
questions.
area?
So this is a school bus stop. Again, the darker color is 300 feet in a direct line from that bus stop, and then this
So what is
yellow
that, the gas
color
station?
is 500 feet.
Where your hand is, show me where the gas station is.
That is the gas station
Okay.
building. Those are the
And is that
pumps.
other one on the end Tasters?
Tasters, yeah, it would be right here.
There.
So within the 500-foot zone,
Well,
not
Tasters
within
will
the
be
300 foot.
moving with this, well, what we saw in the conceptual,
Can't do that.
the sketch plan, that end of that building was changing to a transit center, correct?
You keep,
Okay, fine. We're just trying to get location.
Can I ask a question though?
Yeah, go ahead.
I noticed when you gave the different jurisdictions and what, what they restrict, buffers, et cetera, what is the adjacent to residency dwelling? Like, what is that? I know what it means, but really, what does that mean?
There's the Crested Butte one.
Yeah, it's Crested Butte, and I read about it. I did some research over the weekend, and I was reading about it. I just was curious what that really means.
If you're a kind of a traditionally laid out grid community, their notion would be to keep it away from residential units.
Is that hotels, or is that homes, or is that multi-family?
Well-
I can't speak for, for Durango, it's single-family homes.
And for Breckenridge, it's residential.
Because, I'm not talking about the Snowmass Center redevelopment, but I'm just saying in a broad scheme, when something does happen there and you do put in residential homes, is that something that we should be considering? This is a question. I'm not starting a war.
That's for you guys. Again.
No, but that's my question to everyone.
We don't have that restriction in the planning right now.
Could we go back to, that's a very good question. Go back to the Snowman Center.
Sorry, you want
Okay,
this map,
so
correct?
I'm trying to remember what we saw at sketch plan where all the residential would be, which is pretty much up in the draw area, wasn't it?
Sketch is sketch.
I know, John, but we're trying just to get our bearings.
So what you saw for the sketch plan, Madam Mayor, would be where the red line is on Kearns Road there. You can see Kearns Road going up. Go to your right, Travis, and then go up the road to the post office. The red line right there to the right of that was gonna be a whole bunch of duplexes, like 6 or 7 of them. So it would be on the right.
There's gonna be residential.
Right,
in
and there's gonna be residential up on the hillside.
But if you measure from,
Proposed.
And, if you looked at the Crested Butte or the Breckenridge, they just said within any building or structure that contains residential, or, as Alyssa said, adjacent to any additional.
And mine was just simply a question. I didn't really, I wanted.
But it doesn't have a lineal footage. It just says,
Right, but like,
adjacent.
what kind of residential? I know it says multi-use is exempt in one of those places, but,
it's
if you're on Albert Lane on the top level, you're across from residential. I'm not saying we should put that restriction in. I'm just thinking about if the mall were to get redeveloped, or if the Snowmass Center were to get redeveloped, like, is that something that we
Well-
need to be thinking about?
Well, maybe it doesn't so much apply to Snowmass Village because
of our nodes.
this is an overview. We still have the underlying zoning. So you still need to be zoned commercial.
Right, but all those
So
places on
wait a
Albert
minute,
Lane are
wait a minute, wait a
commercial.
minute. So the homes and things that are gonna be built around the Snowmass Center
Yes.
are residential. They're not zoned commercial.
No, I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about if you wanted it, if you end up putting houses there, what does this adjacent to residential dwelling mean? And do we want to have
Well,
something
but that's
like
my
that?
point. My point is, here in Snowmass, we don't have a lot of residences, whether you call them, whether that includes, I don't know. Are you trying to figure out what does a residence include? Does it include a hotel? Does it include private?
Single-family.
Right, in
Single fa-
Breckenridge, it says adjacent to any property being used for residential
Well,
purpose,
if-
multi-use
if-
buildings
If you want to
exempt.
find out what that means, call up the town manager and ask him.
No, I do understand what it means. I'm just saying, my question
Well,
mainly was,
You
is that
don't seem to
something?
understand what it means.
Oh my God.
I think
Forget it.
your question really is define adjacent.
Right, I'm just saying,
And you
is
know
that
what?
something
You
we
can
need to think
define it
about?
any way you want.
Right, it was just something that came up, it triggered me, I wrote a note on it, and I was simply asking the question.
Forget it.
I would say from any single-family home right now, would be my definition of adjacent. So, if I remember looking at where the single-family homes or whatever it was up more into the
The
draw.
townhomes were right along this.
Yeah, I know
line.
where the townhomes were.
Multifamilies in here and in here, employee housing's in this area.
Well, and that's like another thing, it's like,
Well,
did you want
there's also-
adjacent to be employee
also-
housing?
there's also employee housing on this floor right here, across here. Proposed.
This makes it really makes it difficult within what we consider the community serving location. Now also having proposed residential within a variety, whether it be employee, whether it be single family or duplexes. So back to the words of residential. I think that's an area that I'm kind of trying to wrap my arms around.
In the framework now, we don't have any restrictions regarding residential.
Right, and that's why I brought it up.
Right,
That
so
was my
that's-
whole point.
If I can speak on behalf of the town of Crestview and the town of Breckenridge, I think they're envisioning those situations where they have like a Victorian home on the main street or the commercial district of town. They didn't want a marijuana business to come in located directly next to those homes. I don't think we have a situation where that would apply. And if we did have a residential area, it would be within a multi-use building, at least within this marijuana district overlay.
So, let me restate what I think I hear you saying. So,
I don't
If-
know.
I just, words are extremely important as we work through this. So if you have a building and it has commercial somewhere within it, and then you could also have residential, it would seem to me that the location, you could have a consideration of pot store within a multi-purpose location.
As we have currently drafted our framework, yes, and I believe as Crested Butte and Breckenridge have their code worded, yes,
Okay.
under both
Yes.
examples.
So having said that, and thinking about what we saw in terms of sketch plan, more of the residential gummy bears. I know we had townhomes on the right-hand side as you come up, Kearns, and I do remember above, whatever road that, the backside of where the old related offices were, and some residential up there, but the mixed-use building would be the primary core of the commercial serving buildings, with different entrances for residential than from commercial, correct?
Yes.
That is
So
how I
I
understand
think
it, yes.
that would be a consideration for me in a mixed-use building.
What's before you is, right now, in that green building that's showing, it would be an allowed area for it to go.
It would be an allowed area for it to go.
In that green, it would be allowed.
Right, but I feel like the question is, if you're putting in residences that are not in a multi-use building, do you want to have some sort of buffer around them? That is the point.
That's the
That's-
next part of it.
And so right now, it's not in there, and if there's three of you that say put in distances from residential use, we can do that, but that's what we're seeing, if there's consensus on distance from residential use.
I guess I'm not clear. If it's a combined building, multi-use, has commercial and has residential, I would say there's no buffer on that.
Right.
If there's residential separate and distinct, then I would put a buffer.
What kind of buffer would you put on, like, I don't wanna talk about the sketch plan, but
Because we got in trouble when we did that.
Not in trouble, I just don't want you to base your decision. So what you're saying is, if this building is zoned commercial,
right,
and these are townhomes,
what's the
that?
buffer?
What's the buffer?
Where the townhomes are, down through Woodbridge, and then above the back road.
So would the road be the buffer?
The
Or are
road,
you talking another 300 foot?
the road could serve as a buffer.
Okay.
So if you put a townhome right there,
Mhm.
it's outside the buffer. The buffer is the road, you said.
Right.
Well, if the road was the buffer, then yes, be on the other side of the road.
Well,
mean, the road is gonna move.
Yeah.
In
Road,
distances from
not only can the
residential.
road move, but there's a potential in that dark green area that is adjacent to the snowmass center, that's inside the road, to be residential.
But-
As a
It's a multi-use building.
It's a multi-use building.
What if it's not attached? What if it's not designed as multi-use? It could be. And what if a multi-use building was put on the opposite side of the road? That could happen too.
Well, back to sketch plan, that's not what we saw, and that was not what has been proposed.
Well, also,
But-
the plan has not gone any further than sketch, so right at the moment, we're not even, we shouldn't even be concerned about what
I
potentially would
think we
be
have to
there.
be concerned about the regulations.
The regulations we're concerned with, that's what we're dealing with. Now, I have a problem with the school bus stop right there by, I'm gonna say the Conoco, where the Conoco was a potential good spot for a potential place away from any residential, and a lot of kids don't walk to the gas station when they get out of the bus. Either their parents wait for them, or they go across the street. From the looks of things right now, the best place to have a pot shop's gonna be underneath the cop shop, okay? Take the garage out and put the pot shop there.
Not in district.
It's not in the district, and municipal facilities are not eligible to be marijuana. The private sector's cheering that you can't have a pot shop in town hall.
You can't have a pot shop under the cop shop?
Nope.
Be secure.
I think it's a good idea, but just extend that boundary again. But anyway, I think that bus stop by the Conoco, either we change the buffer there, because I think I don't want to eliminate the Conoco from a potential retail shop. I would like not to anyway.
Well, the question is Conoco gonna stay?
And
At the
I'd
moment, it
I'd
is.
still urge you to not
Right.
talk
Yeah.
about what is
Is.
there as you determine your
Right.
regulations.
Well, whether it's there or not there, I mean, that's like a main thing that you see, and you want to pull up and see a marijuana shop right there?
Well, you're not gonna see a marijuana shop, you're gonna see a gas station. He could have a very little sign, the size of that little sign right there on the table, that among the other
Yeah,
things.
but
that
no
the-
one says it's going to remain a gas station.
Well, I think if
The whole
it
building
was
could
a
become a
retail
pot
shop,
shop.
it might influence, the owners to keep a gas station there.
I don't know. I can't bet on what I don't know.
Way off in La La Land.
It doesn't have to be within a certain, certain feet away from a municipal building.
No, you just can't participate in ownership, I don't think. I mean, obviously you can institute a buffer around all town-owned facilities if you want.
I'd like to see bus stops removed from the regulation. Bus stops can move. I think they're too restrictive.
I agree with Bill. We have the same problem with the bus stop at the top of the mall, in the West Village Mall. You know, being, and Challenge Aspen, I mean, that eliminates a lot of that potential area.
Well, I'd like to see the bus stop stay in.
Well, I'll be the third to remove them.
You know, okay, obviously, we're in the minority on this one.
What's it,
I mean, when I follow the bus,
So, Alyssa, you brought up this subject about the bus because you mentioned that in Basalt,
Yes.
they prohibit specific bus routes.
Right.
So, what does that mean?
Well, I think that the routes where the school buses are.
right,
Well, that isn't what it means,
And
because I spoke to the chief
I don't know.
of
I
police.
only read it
Well,
online.
Okay, so I'll educate you.
Okay.
What it means is, these are the routes where the kids who in Basalt, the kids walk to school, primarily walk to school.
okay,
These are the routes that the kids take when they walk to school.
okay,
And the reason that they didn't want the pot shop across the street is because they're spending 15 minutes or whatever, walking past in these areas. in my opinion, it's different than a school bus. It's different when there is a school bus stop, and for 10 minutes, the kids get around the school bus, they get on the bus, then they're gone, they come back at the end of the day for 10 minutes or less, they're in that stop, and then they're gone. So it's a different kind of a feeling than walking along the road for whatever it is.
Well, some kids actually do walk from the bus, like, you know.
Yeah,
but
they
but
probably do.
but I will say that the areas where they do walk from the bus are not areas that are in this overlay, anyways. Like Woodbridge, when the kids get off there and
Right.
they're walking to Seasons 4 or
Same
whatever.
Far away.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand that, but you also, you know, if you go and put all that new housing in near the Snowmouse Center, and if it's employee housing, especially with kids, I mean, it's going to change that landscape, and you may see more kids walking that route to the bus.
And maybe we change the bus stop
Maybe.
at that point.
Maybe.
The Rafta bus stop?
No, the school bus stop.
Well, the school bus stop and the red dot is also the Rafta bus.
No, I get that.
Yes.
But we're not talking about rafter buses,
no.
we're talking about the school buses.
Understood, but I'll bet you anything, there's gonna be a school bus route up through the center. But anyway, that's bet on the come. So, I can take away potentially that stop, but I don't agree with all the other stops you wanna remove.
I mean, I guess my feeling is that I'm not willing to make any definite decisions on any of these things till I understand all the other questions I have and
Fair enough,
you know, all that stuff.
fair enough.
So staff's clear. There was direction from 3 to remove the school buses stop from the next maps we look at, correct?
I'm also in favor of removing Challenge Aspen.
Can we go one at a time?
Yeah, well, okay.
Okay, thanks.
There's a
Correct,
consensus from 3 to remove all the school bus stops.
yes.
Okay. And I want to backtrack a little bit too. You wanted 2 versions, Travis, if you could go back up to the Skittles area. You wanted 2 versions
Right,
this way,
yes,
one wider and one more narrow.
yes, one's more
And
triangular.
that was by agreement of all of you.
Right, yes.
Okay, so we've got,
And before I leave that one, just so I can be, our goal is to eliminate opportunities for kind of that ski in, ski out, visual cue from the ski slope.
Right.
So we
Go
can,
and go shops.
we can do some math and figure that out a little bit, what that looks like.
Okay,
so you're talking about extending it up into here then?
I assume so,
yes,
because it was,
Well,
and that's what I'm asking.
well, and that's, I wanted to clarify, because I thought it was the Kids Act, the extensive
Kid activity.
child use here that I don't believe,
But up here, John, where you are now, that's the condos, those are residential, right?
well, the reason that there is commercial space
There's
in this
commercial space in
complex.
some of
Oh,
them.
yeah, sure, of course, the old butch, rather, the edge is there, the edge
Right.
and.
Right,
Yeah.
and if you
So-
wanted to allow a ski and pot shop, boy, the edge would be a good spot.
I would eliminate that one because it's,
So we'll,
I
we'll,
was
with our,
teased.
just the goal we're gonna work towards is
I'm
that
opening,
anything away from the slope, because that
ski and ski out
it encompasses that child issue and that ski in, ski out issue.
We'll do both,
okay,
okay.
okay, go on.
Now, okay, so on that map, we've addressed 2 of the 3 issues. And the last one is Challenge Aspen. Because on that map, the issues were childcare, bus stops, and Challenge Aspen.
Have you talked to Challenge Aspen?
No.
Has there been any obviously they haven't contacted the town regarding their various programs.
Not to my knowledge.
Is AVSC still up there?
I don't know that answer.
Nobody knows? You know?
It's like across from Starbucks.
That's what yeah, where the old Western Heritage Museum used to
Yeah,
be.
but they had a location right in here too.
Okay.
Well, and
The old yoga studio.
yeah, they've moved a few times.
Yeah, exactly.
They kind of take up any vacant spot they can for free.
Okay.
Can I talk about Challenge Aspen now, or are we on a different subject?
The mayor's the chair.
Well, you were the one that directed
just
me to
trying
tell
to
me,
guide-
and we were
I'm
talking
I was
about
Conversation.
busing.
asking about,
Conversation.
I think we need to know a little bit more about Challenge Aspen programs versus just taking them off the list. If they have a regular school program going, I'd love to know about it. And they could even have.
We can't tell you they're not a licensed daycare. I mean, that,
Well, I know that.
I mean, that's the that's the provision that we took from all the other communities. That's the rule we used.
I want to, do they have a school? It's like Anderson Art Ranch. They have kids there. It's a school. Does Challenge Aspen have a school that teens go to or young children go to? That I don't know. I'm not prepared to take Challenge Aspen off till I know more about their program. Where are you, Alyssa?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I'm not prepared to do anything until we I understand more about the restrictions on the number of shops, and I have some other questions, and I want the whole picture before I am willing to concede any sort of regulatory schemes.
You understand that the proposal before you does not limit the number of shops.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
I'm aware.
If that's a change, that would be
Yeah.
great to know.
No, I'm fully aware. And that's part of one of the things I
Well,
want to talk about.
because if there's a limit on the number of shops, this spatially zoning and buffers an overlay, it's kind of meaningless. So if that's a fundamental cornerstone of the regulatory scheme that the council wants to enact, it would be very efficient to know in advance of developing a spatial scheme.
Well, I mean, my question in relation to that is based on the way that, you know, whether it's the 300 or the 500 circumference area, how many shops does that really mean that could, what is the max number that really could be possible? I guess. I don't understand that.
That's different.
Right, and so I want to understand that before I'm willing to say I don't think we should restrict or we should restrict the number.
But when you said number, that's why.
No, sorry,
And
that's what I meant.
Yeah, I would like, that's where I want to go to, but I also have another question relative to that. Are we required, if you have one, you have to have two, John, because of competition?
No, you're not required.
No, okay, so way back when we first started this conversation, way back when, I thought, I heard that if you had one, you had to have two because of the competition issue,
Monopoly.
the monopoly issue,
But
okay.
it's just, it only makes sense because then you're removing yourself from the decision of picking one operator and, you know, the discrimination, the opportunity, and if you only have one, you can't regulate price. So, it just makes good sense to not put the town in that position. That's why staff is recommending a spatially based regulatory scheme.
Okay,
Try and dial in the right density that the market will support without getting into picking individual operators.
so I really like to know what's the max number with these spatial, whether it be 300 or 500.
Well, there's not gonna be 300 or 500 pot shops.
No, in terms of these circles,
Right.
if you look at that now, it appears there would be one location up in Snowmass Village Mall until you removed, if you removed the schools.
If you go with this map right here, the only place they could be is right down here to the east of Slopeside Lanes.
I thought we had the little place where the flower shop is.
That's in the 300.
No, that's over here.
That's in the 300.
No, that's in the 500. If you make it only 300, then yes.
She
Right.
spoke to this map, and
Yeah.
that's what I was explaining is, with this map, with this is this color is 500.
Right.
But you could
Only
have,
places that are zone commercial, that are outside of the buffers and inside the district, near the mall, is right here.
So that's one shop.
I thought we already got clear direction on that earlier in the meeting, that this was an area of great concern.
right,
Wait, but slopeside lanes, that area was okay.
okay, the slope side lane was,
Slopeside lane's right here.
If it's 500 feet, it's not eligible, if those restrictions.
No, it's the 300 feet.
Okay, then it's outside the two 300-foot boundaries.
Right. So is the flower shop space.
right.
I mean, if you take the restrictions to 300, then you're allowing slopeside lanes and you're allowing the building where the flower shop is.
And then you have the issue of the distance between pot shops, but, yes, I agree with that.
But, so my question is, in those, that's one shop at slopeside lanes, but how many shops in that other area if you're at the 300?
It's gonna be almost, I mean, John said we could do that, and I gotta disagree with him a little bit. I mean, it's gonna be almost impossible math, us guessing. We're gonna pick a door front and start,
Going 300 feet.
and it's gonna be really difficult to say where the next doorstop is and, you know, and how they can be, and we could do a best guess, and, you know, we could say, you know, right now, just looking at that, that's a 600-foot distance. If you have a 300-foot distance between stores, you could, potentially have two. I mean, 2 to 3 would be the max, but that's best
if you're taking
guess.
a straight line from the bus stop to the slope.
Right.
It's like 650 feet.
Right.
Okay, now if you stick one in down here at Slopeside Lane, and you go up like this, and now you're up in here,
That could be the
that could,
distance.
that could be 300 feet. And then, I mean, you can't get a hard number, but we
No,
can
I'm
give
just-
you some scenarios.
That would be helpful.
But is there space still on Albert Lane somewhere?
Well,
No.
no.
Not if you include,
Not if
Right.
you include the
No,
House.
the dragon's in.
challenge
The
aspect.
dragon.
The dragon's in.
Pardon me, Slow
Yeah, the
Groovin'.
dragon, yes, the dragon's in there.
Slow Groovin's right there.
Right.
But in its current configuration, this is the deck, so it'd be,
I was going to suggest the circle around Challenge Aspen be modified to not 300 feet, but less, in order that we could potentially have one on Albert Lane.
well, let's check out Challenge Aspen's
Okay.
programming first before you make a decision on
Okay.
a buffer there. It's not, it's an individual category, it's not under, school bus routes or childcare, which are
Okay.
broader categories.
Okay, and
What's, I guess the question we're asking them is,
I don't know the programs that they offer. Is it, do they do small kids that are disabled? Do they do school age? I know they do school age, but I don't know if
I
they
mean, I
have.
feel like mostly they bring them out to the slope side and that's where they start from. I don't know that people are specifically going in there,
Yes.
but the people that work there. I mean, I don't know. I don't spend time
I
on
don't
there.
know, I don't know. I really don't know.
Madam Mayor, could
Yeah, Bill.
could I offer a suggestion
What's that?
to try to find out from them what percentage of their programming is children arbitrarily, under 10 and over 10, under 15, over 15,
That's part of their programming, yeah.
okay? I mean, and to get an idea of what percentage, what we're talking about.
Any kid. I don't really, I just want to know the programming and what age groups do they cover.
Well, that's what I think I
I
said.
don't
That's
want,
what we have.
no, the percentages I don't really care about right now.
Well, okay, I care about percentages.
Well, we just get the detail, just get the detail.
Well, I think the detail will include percentages.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll be happy.
I really would like to focus on knowing how many could be in either there or over at the center in a mixed-use combination.
What exactly do you mean by that?
Okay, mixed use,
Is residential and commercial?
yes. Now, and having a very lengthy conversation last night with Ann Mullins on a variety of issues. We had a really good conversation about Aspen and pot shops and their whole strategy of pot shops. She puts forth that if she had to do it again, and I can't speak for the other members of council because I didn't verify a conversation with them, she wishes they would have limited the number of pot shops in Aspen to 4 versus letting the economy drive it. Her recommendation to us would be to limit the number that you have in Snowmass Village and allow your regulatory scheme to change after you have some experience. Do you see where I'm going with that? You can't eliminate pot shops, but you can change your regulations to be looser in the future, depending on your experience. Is that, I'm looking at John, you can modify regulatory scheme, right?
Yep. I would just submit that the experience in Aspen is in its infancy. That I don't believe the market has shaken out the appropriate number yet.
There's still too many.
It could go up, it could go down. But a lot of those operators are still in their initial lease terms, and
But, so there's,
I understand what you're saying, I'm just submitting.
start smaller and then change your regulations with our experience.
That's fine.
Versus letting the economy just drive it. You could wind up with what I think could be almost 6 pot shops when I did my math.
I think we have time to talk about the amount or the number of pot shops or retail shops or medical shops, whatever you want to call them. I think we need to focus more on where the potential places are.
I say Snowmass Center and the mall.
Well, of course, but I'm saying, you know, regarding the Challenge Aspen and the bus stop on top and talking about the bus stops, I think by releasing some of those places so that border or that boundary goes away, we have more options to figure out where's 300 foot from one pot shop to the other shop, or what's going to happen.
Right, you do have more time.
Okay. So I think we need to start from point 0 and start from where, what exactly is Challenge Aspen going to do for us? And again, I'm still in favor of taking it off, the dot off along with the bus stop on the top, which gives us more opportunity for a retail shop or a medical shop to be up there.
Go ahead.
Proposal for the tax is only on retail sales.
I understand that,
Okay.
yeah, right. I just brought up the word medical because some of the shops will have both.
Whoa, there's a whole separate licensing.
No,
That's a,
it's a whole different deal.
That's
Yeah,
a whole
okay,
different-
okay. I don't know that much
John,
about it. That's
John?
fine.
that's part of the regulatory scheme that you are considering.
Can we see the map, like the closer to the base village end? So I can see what that looks like.
Would you go to the one that got the bus stops going?
So the blue dot is the treehouse,
It's the front door, yes.
and what
300 feet,
is all that?
500
Where's the
feet.
new plaza?
Right here. Ooh, that might be building 6. Somewhere in here.
So it's saying you could put it there? I mean, first of all, the building 6 right now is a town-owned building. So, I mean,
That would be up to us, I guess.
yeah, I mean, I feel like you need to see more restrictions in that part of Base Village. I mean, one thing that I was thinking about when I was looking at what the other towns, other jurisdictions had done, and they were talking about, different feet measurements from a park. and you're gonna have the ice skating rink, and you're gonna have the water feature, which is gonna be like a park in the summer. And so it's odd to me that you would allow it near any of those spaces.
You would allow it, we would allow it, because it's you all.
I'm saying us, fine, that we would allow it in that area, knowing that just like, you know, that part that's under the Skittles, you're dealing with high concentration of kids. I mean, that's.
To me, that goes, I mean, agree. It's, within I would make it a separate area because it's a town-owned building and 300 feet around a public building or town-owned building, or you could go, because you will have a lot of kids down there.
You're gonna, if you're gonna compare the plaza to a park, which is what I hear, okay?
Right.
If you're gonna try to, wanna compare the plaza to a park, then the restriction should be from the plaza, not from a building, so that the restriction incorporates the building,
Okay,
okay?
that's fair.
Okay?
Yeah, that works.
So, I don't know, I mean, looking at these, there's 175, there's 250 feet. I would, I don't know, pick a number and we'll see what it looks like on the map.
I'm looking at basalt.
One was 175.
Yeah, but Crested Butte's such a little bitty place.
No, I know. There was.
Crested Butte's 175.
Yeah, I think there was only two on that.
There's only two, 175 and 250.
I would say 200.
Oh, and there's 200 from Basalt, 175 in Crested Butte, 250 in Durango.
I don't know that, I hate to pull a number out of the hat without knowing some measurements from where the public, where the,
Well, if I may,
okay,
just pick the midpoint, 200, and Travis will put it on a map,
okay,
and we'll get to look at it.
okay. I was just gonna say, well, what's the distance from the park to the road or, the, bus stop or the transit center, but that's fine.
So the goal is to ensure that there is not a retail store within X number of feet of the ice skating rink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is that? And I don't know what the size is.
I mean, because in the drawings from Base Village, that area next to it looks like a little park with the water
On the-
feature and the.
I agree.
Will you switch me over to Air Media on the presentation? I can show you guys right now.
Where are we
Give
going?
me,
Can I
30
ask a
seconds.
question while he's doing that?
Yeah, go for it.
The operating hours, I know that it's anywhere within that range, but I was just, it doesn't say it on that other sheet, what other jurisdictions do. I'm just wanted to know what's the most common. I mean, that was I don't know what Aspen's is. I mean, I know what specific shops do, but I just am curious.
Okay.
knows.
Basalt,
We're not
we're not
taking,
taking
we're
public
not taking,
Basalt is 8 AM to midnight.
oh, that one on Main Street.
Carbondale,
No, that does, no.
let's see, where, if I.
That's the
I
max.
didn't write it down.
The one on the Main Street in Basalt next to Bernard's closes much, much earlier.
Yeah, no, well, but those are maximums,
roughly.
Oh,
right? Because
Right.
that's what it is.
Oh,
It's a-
okay.
It's a maximum.
Does anyone know what Aspen is?
9 to midnight, but most are 9 to 9.
You know, and I honestly, I didn't write down the others in the valley because they were all similar.
That's fine. I was just, that was more of a question than anything else.
I was fine with 10. 8 to 10.
I'm fine with it too. It was more just curiosity. Can I ask another question?
Go for it.
About the nuisance. So in this packet,
yeah.
it says marijuana odors resulting from marijuana products must not permeate beyond the premises. But I'm assuming that there's like specific regulations on these things. I mean, that's not the only comment, right? I mean,
That's the framework, there'll be detail to follow.
So I had a question relative to the nuisance, why, you're getting ready to pull this up, and we're gonna close this probably about 5 minutes. John, when it comes to nuisance, it appeared to me that you can't use the product within the establishment or near the establishment.
You can't consume in an establishment, and once you're outside the establishment, you're in public. You can't consume in public.
What's to prevent what happens, what we've seen in the alleys in Aspen? Tons of, you know, my hairdresser's on the
I
alley.
would call that illegal consumption, and then
Okay.
you're talking about enforcement.
Okay, okay.
I mean, look, there's there's no smoking signs all over Snowmass, and people still sit at the bus stop and smoke their cigarettes.
We have an outdoor smoking ordinance.
Right, but people still do it.
So obviously police are gonna be busier. Okay, okay, Travis, you wanna,
I mean, this is just a 250-foot circle around the plaza, or where I estimate the center of the plaza to be.
okay, get me oriented here.
So
Camp.
there's El Camp Gondola,
Oh, okay, I got it.
base of it. There's the six-pack, Skittles, Treehouse.
Travis, can you go to the center of the treehouse, or the entrance to the treehouse and add a 300-foot circle?
Yes.
Boy, it sure doesn't look that way today.
That's 250.
Oh, man.
I didn't know what I was looking at.
Yeah, that's, I'm going, wait a minute, there's no buildings there.
Perfect. So that's a 300-foot childcare buffer,
Okay.
and that's a 250-foot public plaza buffer.
And what sits in that crevice?
Pardon?
What's in that crevice between the two?
Saki.
So you're saying you could put a retail establishment there?
I didn't say that.
No. I'm saying because
You said that.
no, because
I
it's
said
in
I
the
didn't even know
crack.
what was in that crevice.
I'll put it at 300 feet.
From the plaza?
No, you
I mean,
probably
this
could put-
this is super guess. I mean,
Yeah.
what you see on those other maps is 100 times
I
more.
think we're wasting our
efficient than
time.
this. I mean, if
Well,
No, but
No,
it's the goal that you're shooting for to make sure that no stores can be within view of the ice rink. That's the goal.
or in proximity of the ice rink.
So, view proximity.
Yeah,
so
Let us work
we're
on that
winding
map.
down. Let us come back with a 100-foot circle, a 200-foot circle, and a 300-foot circle around the plaza. So you can see the ramifications of each different distance, rather than
okay,
this 250.
that's fair.
that's fine.
Yeah, because I think, you know,
That would be very helpful.
Okay. Well, it's almost 5:25.
We got one. We need 5 more minutes.
Okay.
If you, please, I don't know if you want to talk about it.
Well, when you're finished, I'll bring up the subject.
Unless there's anything else,
It's on this topic. Is what we need.
it is on this topic? Okay, okay, Clint.
So the moratorium that we've got on this ends October 31st. With these kind of discussions, I'm going to be presumptuous and say it's going to be difficult to get the regulations in place before the moratorium ends. I think I'm going to speak for John. I think we're on the same page that we're suggesting that we extend the moratorium so that the moratorium stays in place while you continue to develop these regulations.
So would the moratorium go 6 months or 3 months or?
Decide that.
Yeah, what we just know is we're confident that getting this ordinance passed prior to the moratorium ending is slim.
I think some of us are going to be gone.
Well, the only meeting you're all together
the vote.
between now and October 15th, because an ordinance, unless it was an emergency
Yeah,
ordinance, would
right.
take 15 days
Six-
after.
60 days.
So we're
Wait a
suggesting,
minute, what's the sidebar discussion?
We're just trying to figure out
We're just trying to
the
get a
days,
sense
you know,
of how
trying
long
to.
it should extend.
John?
So what Clint said, that
Right.
we recommend that, that you extend the moratorium based on the fact that you're all not gonna be together
That's what we were
For a
talking about
month.
because of attendance, right?
for a month. And a non-emergency ordinance would have to be second
So
reading.
if we did, if the ordinance just fell off the edge of the world here.
Moratorium.
Moratorium, excuse me. All right, and what's the result of that? Because we're in the process of trying to figure out the zoning anyway.
Without a moratorium, an applicant can come in with a state license and locate in town.
Wherever they want to,
Wherever they want to.
where they can get a lease.
Well,
Okay,
It
but
would
before
have
we
to
put
be-
the zoning in place, you're saying?
well, right. If they were in a zone that allowed commercial use, they could locate there.
Okay.
John, what's your recommendation for us, having worked through the moratorium? So the process would be an extension of the moratorium after October 31 until, it has to have 2 readings, right?
Right.
Okay. And I don't know what our attendance is up through the holidays in
Well,
January.
I would recommend that you, do first reading at your meeting on the 17th. And
Of
do
what?
second read next Monday.
Okay.
And that you have second reading either the 1st or the 15th. Unless you want to do an emergency ordinance and.
No.
I would recommend, just so you know, the ordinance that extended the moratorium, the original moratorium and the intervening extensions require that it be extended by ordinance. So that's so 2 readings is always better than emergency 1.
So I would say let's follow through process. Our focus needs to be on regulations, needs to be focused on, we're all comfortable, and we won't satisfy everybody, but we all need to be comfortable. We need to be thoughtful for the community as well as all of our guests as we move through the regulations and the regulatory language. So I would say let's proceed with language for next week. And I would ask town staff to advise us in terms of the length of the moratorium, what you think it might take for us to move through this. I would say no more than 3 months or 6 months.
I'd say no more than 3 months, but I'd like to, just to keep this
I-
ball
I-
rolling.
I
I
just
just
don't-
think we're stalling by going 6 months.
No, I don't know what the attendance is going to be.
Well, I understand, but I think in 6 months, we could,
That's the reason why I said 6 months.
So
You-
3 months or 6 months?
well, if we extended it for 6 months, what's the dilemma if we solve the problem sooner?
There's no dilemma.
There's no
If you
dilemma.
You just
pass
take you can take take it
We
off.
can take it off anytime we want.
The ordinance enacting the regulatory scheme would say that this goes into effect in
And
such and such a date, and the
and that ceases.
moratorium is lifted as of that day. I'll tell you what, draft the language and I'll leave a blank in there, and you can all think
Okay.
about it till Monday.
I think that's a
and
good
we'll fill
idea.
the blank in.
Okay.
I will put the word months, blank months. I won't put in years.
And Rhonda, you're always so good about sending
Thank you,
out the
John.
attendance. If you could give
Not
us
that you
who's gonna
couldn't
be,
change it to days if you wanted to.
who's
but-
gonna be out of town and stuff as over the next few months. Okay, that'd be helpful. Okay, it's almost 5.
anything, nobody's given me anything for November and December, so.
Okay, let's be mindful and help round out with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope somebody takes me away.
Well, I really want to thank all of our guests who came this evening. As you can see, this is going to be a laborious process, but we're getting there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I haven't even worked on